It was quite emotional looking at those pictures, singing, especially singing Old Lang Syne at the end. I mean, I can't really believe it's over. And at the stroke of midnight, that's it. Deal done. What's going to happen?
Yeah, that timeline felt like my life was flashing before my eyes. The last 3.5 years really has been tumultuous here in British politics, but the day has finally arrived that many people thought never would. What will happen at 11 p.m. local time, which is midnight in Brussels, 1 a.m. tomorrow morning in South Africa? Britain will leave the European Union. Before that, we will hear from Boris Johnson in a speech which will be televised at around midnight South Africa time. He'll call for unity and express optimism about this new era. But before that, he will hold a cabinet meeting in Sunderland in the northeast of the country. The reason for that is that Sunderland was the first Leave voting constituency to be declared on the night of the referendum back in 2016. It was the moment really that we all realised something was up in terms of the result heading towards Brexit. It's also, though, a part of the country that voted in many constituencies for the Conservatives in this election and has historically been a stronghold for the opposition Labour Party. Boris Johnson's government has committed to levelling up the United Kingdom, spending more money in parts of the country like this, so that's why he is there. We will also see a celebration in Parliament Square as the clock ticks down to 11 p.m. UK time. That will be organised by Brexiteers. We will also, though, see counter-demonstrations around Westminster today and in Scotland and other parts of the country too, from Remainers who say this is not a day to be celebrated.
OK, there is a year, at least, of transition. What will those within the UK who want to leave as well be doing in this period, other than observing its success or otherwise?
Well, this transition period is an interesting period for the UK because it stops being a member of the European Union at midnight Brussels time later. It therefore is not a member of the EU institutions anymore. It can't be involved in the decision-making process. But for the rest of this year, the transition period means that actually many of its relations with the European Union don't change. And so trade won't change very much in the coming months. Many businesses, many travellers, many individuals heading to and from the European mainland, if you like, won't notice much difference to their lives. But by the end of the year, the UK government says it can have reached a trade deal with the European Union. That's a very optimistic target indeed. All sorts of issues to be ironed out with the EU. And that's why there's speculation that Boris Johnson may end up extending the transition period. He insists he won't. In the meantime, though, he and his government are knuckling down very quickly to trade talks with the EU to try and hammer out a deal by the end of the year. We expect to hear from Boris Johnson. Early next week, we think he will give a speech in which he will set out the government's aims in those trade talks, and Leave supporters will be hoping that this is something that can be done and dusted by the end of this year, and meaning that there won't be a transition period extension this time around.
And Ollie, tell us more about the political ramifications, what it's likely to have within the UK and outside of its borders.
Well, it's really very difficult to predict. I mean, in terms of domestic UK politics, we have a Prime Minister now with a thumping majority. He was returned handsomely at that election in December, Boris Johnson. So in many ways, he's very strong indeed. He can pursue the kind of trade deal that he wants, and he is likely not to face huge amounts of opposition in Westminster. He faces huge challenges as well, though. We will hear later today from Nicola Sturgeon, the First Minister in Scotland. She will talk about Scotland being taken out of the European Union against its will. She will renew her calls for an independence referendum in Scotland. Northern Ireland as well. The deal that Boris Johnson has reached is a tricky one. It may see checks on goods coming from mainland United Kingdom towards Northern Ireland. That is what many unionists in Northern Ireland said they just wouldn't be able to contemplate. They didn't want to see. That raises questions, therefore, about the future of Northern Ireland in the Union of the UK. Will there be a reunification referendum in Ireland at some point in the not-too-distant future? So huge existential questions for Boris Johnson to address about the future, the harmony, the union of the United Kingdom.
Well, commiserations and celebrations for you all there in the UK. Ollie Barrett, thanks a lot for that.